So, welcome everyone to the panel, Next Generation of VCs, Are Founders the Better Investors? My name is Caspar Schlenk, I'm editor at Gründerszene, and I'm happy to discuss this topic with three wonderful guests on my side here. On my right is Sohaila Ouffata. She's the director of BMW iVentures. In their portfolio, there are startups like Just Park or Move It. And before, she worked in the media and telco industry. Welcome.
Thanks.
So in the middle is Thomas Lueke. He co-founded the startup Bonusbox, a Berlin-based startup who focused on online loyalty programs. And he now switched sides and is now working for the VC Cherry Ventures. Cherry is a quite famous young VC here in Berlin, and they invested in companies like Flixbus or Auto1. So welcome.
Thanks.
And there's Andrei from Accel, the famous VC from overseas. Andrei invested in a really cool German company which is called Celonis, which I really like. And yeah, I'm happy to have you here. He worked before in a trading startup and yeah, is an alumni of Princeton and Harvard, so obviously a really smart guy.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe the first question for Thomas. So your startup Bonusbox was VC funded. So what was your view on VCs and investors before you changed the sides?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we care about at Cherry is that we sort of want to empathize a lot with the founders. And for that, I think for the entire team, it was important to sort of have some fundraising experience on the other side. And I think when we were fundraising for our startup, we've sort of learned what that means, because it's a very tedious process. It's actually quite frustrating, I would say, to the most extent, because it takes a long time. There's sort of a lot at stake from your side, but not so much from the investor side while the process is going on. And I think now it really helps to be conscious of that, because we really value the founder's time. And I think that's something that everyone in our team really takes to the heart and is aware of.
Mm. So do you have one really annoying experience with investors in mind from your time?
I think we're in general we're really happy with our investors back then as well. I think they were actually quite supportive. In the beginning, we had mostly angels who were also former entrepreneurs mostly. And then at a later stage, we had rather institutional investors, so a very classic setup. And I think in general, they were actually quite supportive throughout the entire process. I think for us, I mean, Bonusbox didn't turn out to be a very large company, but it turned out to be a company that is still generating quite some revenue. And I think in our case, it would have been better actually to not raise VC funding, because it would have been an interesting side business, but it didn't turn out to be a very VC-able business. It was more now the characteristics of an agency business. But that's obviously sort of what you know in hindsight. And we also didn't intend to build that type of a business. We intended to build a VC-funded, very scalable business, which in a way we didn't achieve. So I think on that part, I would say everything fine with the investors, and actually our experience was fairly good.
But you've never been rejected from an investor?
No, definitely. You're rejected constantly. That's just that's what you sign up for when you start a company. Basically, most of the time you're gonna be rejected, and most investors are not gonna invest in your company. And maybe something that also changed now from being on the other side is when we went out fundraising, we just talked to everyone, and we didn't really have so much appreciation for what's the background of the respective VC. It was more, okay, we need to raise money. We know what we're doing with it anyway, so you leave us alone and give us the money sort of attitude. And I think, you know, in hindsight, it would have been better to be more specific about like which investors to approach, which are the ones who are really investing at our stage, which are the ones who can really support us with sort of the problems that we're currently facing. And I think we could have been a bit more selective because there's just a lot of meetings that you take as an entrepreneur as well that are probably useless because you're wasting your time, but you're also potentially wasting the investor's time. So like Andrei wouldn't invest in probably most likely in a sort of pre-revenue, pre-product startup that's not in London. You know, yes, it might be interesting for you to get to know, but likely Accel is going to invest like probably slightly later, right? So.
Okay. So Sohaila, you've been working now as a VC for 2.5 years. Did you ever have the feeling that startup and founders have the feeling you don't understand our side, you don't understand our problems as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I said, previously my focus was more on the startup side. So then changing sides, as you had said, is definitely something that opens up your perspective. But at the end of the day, you know, it's about being appreciative. You know, as said before, understanding that everyone's time is valuable. So as much as the VC needs to understand that the startup, like they're watching their cash burn every day, like they have some serious business going on, and you got to be really respectful. It's the same for the investors. So I think it's a mutual thing. You know, you really have to get it from both sides and understand what's the right fit, who do I need, who can support me, but also from a VC perspective, don't waste entrepreneurs' time. I see that quite often, and I'm not really happy about that.
Okay. So Andrei, what is your view on that topic? Is it sometimes hard to understand the founder perspective?
Yeah, so for us, I would say at Accel, we try to combine folks with deep operating experience and folks, you know, who've done investing for a long time. And, you know, all together, we're very collaborative internally, and we try to, you know, put together the best SWAT team to analyze an opportunity. In the end, you know, if I look at the founders we work with, they just want someone who has empathy for what they're building and can help along the way. And this help is so multi-pronged that it's no one specific skill or one specific body of knowledge that can help them go to the next stage. So, you know, we have in-house, you know, as a venture partner, the CTO of SpringSource, the founder of Pivotal. And, you know, he would help CTOs with some of their kind of architectural problem. And then, you know, maybe someone like me who's comes from a more data quantitative background can help with some of their, you know, BI or analytics capabilities. Then some folks who've worked with a lot of marketplaces in the past can, you know, help with kind of hiring on that front. So it's really, I think in the end, founders don't really have preconceived notions that, hey, I want to work with a former operator or with a career investor. It's more, am I getting all the help I can to build a really great company?
But imagine for one moment that there's a really separate one we see with founder background and one with not. So when you are founding again, which one will you prefer?
So there's something I have to say here, and I'm comparing also Europe versus the US. First of all, Europe is much more decentralized. So you don't have folks, you know, like if, for example, if you're a VP level person at Dropbox and went to, you know, Stanford or one of the Ivies, you can build a venture career in the US just based on that. In Europe, it's not like that because there's no network that's as deep, not even in London, not even in Berlin. So you have to hustle and find great companies all over Europe. So first of all, your network will only carry you that far. Second, you know, a lot of founders come from, you know, our first-time founders in Europe. So they don't necessarily, one, have kind of all these expectations, and two, they need to be found somehow. So I find career investors are, you know, who spend years, you know, hustling and trying to dig, you know, in the ground to look for every single company in Europe, maybe better positioned to find that company, understand like the competitive landscape, understand the whole ecosystem, and being able to help that way. And third, I would say, and this is more of a kind of long-term observation, I find the shelf life of skills or like of domain knowledge is a bit kind of decreasing right now. So if you think, just because like markets get changed so fast and you know all these platform shifts happen sooner and sooner, you know that experience that an operator might bring may not be relevant 5 years down the road. At least some of the domain knowledge aspects of it. So I would say it's hard, as a founder to have preconceived notions. I want to work with kind of this person, when there's just so many other aspects of building a business that kind of a full investment firm can offer you and should offer you.
So what is your answer to that question?
Actually, I would rather be controversial, but I have to agree. I think out of the million variables, you just probably you're not going to make the decision on, oh, I really want to go with this operator, or I really want to go with that non-operator, or the guy with the investing background. It's really more, who do I get along with and who do I trust, right? And like trust is built on so many levels. If you have a firm like Accel that has been around for so long and has done great investments, obviously there's a lot of trust that goes along with that, for example, right? And I think, as Andrei said, there's a million variables. Like just being operator or non-operator is probably not the most decisive one.
You gotta, let me just add to that one. You really got to get along with the culture of the investor you're intending to work with. I mean, somehow, I always make jokes, it's a bit like getting married, You better be sure that you guys get along, because you could stay together for quite a long time and have some difficulties, along the way. So yes, of course, there are some checkboxes. Is this a well-known VC? Is this someone who is very well connected? Do they have a great portfolio? Can I learn? Can they help me to scale the business? But these are more the rational pieces, right? But it's a culture. You got to get along, And with that particular investment partner or investment manager that you're working with, that person truly has to have a passion for your business. That person has to fight for you for everything you need. That has to be there for you, whatever it is, whatever kind of business challenge you have. And that's what it is, It's a people business, so it's not a miracle. You just got to find someone, as you said, you trust, that has the competences, and then work with those people.
But isn't it easier to gain that trust if you have a track record of successful companies in your CV?
I would say yes, but I mean the other thing is, if we have founders who come to our office and you speak with them and sort of you can really understand in which situation they are, I think that also resonates with the founders, right? And I think the other thing is we're all still fairly young and usually sort of roughly the same age, and that's at least in our firm, it's almost holds for the entire company. I think that also resonates with founders because we can really speak on eye level. And I think what has also changed in the recent past is that, now VC also in Europe becomes a competitive industry. And maybe 5-10 years ago, there were only a few investors. And if they said no, you were in trouble, right? But now the best companies are the ones who can choose their investors, right? And the good deals are the ones that are super competitive. So we have to step up our game, and I think overall that's very healthy and very good that there is increasing competition, and you have to play on all levels. You have to play your operator strength, you have to play your track record in investing, and all these things matter.
Yeah, and I would add it's also not a black or white situation. So for example, with Salonis, you mentioned earlier, we actually brought on Carson Thoma and Alex Stott as co-investors and board members. So one of them is founder of Hybris, sold to SAP. Another one was to be, head of sales at Click, one of the large BI companies. And they're kind of bringing that operational experience on the board, where we felt, hey, it would be nice to have some SAP or kind of enterprise sales knowledge, in the situation. And, we do that all the time with companies we back. Other funds get a bit more creative around, having former operators or former founders they've backed, co-invest in the fund or actually scout for companies, for them. Board members we bring all the time for folks with former operating experience. So I think there's it's not just a matter of, hey, you're a point person in the VC firm, does that person tick all these boxes, but does she or he surround you with 10 other potentially even more impactful people along the way.
Okay. So now changing to an investor perspective, do you think it's easier to understand and find a good business case, to found a good team with entrepreneurial experience? Maybe Thomas?
Yeah, so I would say actually no, because I've also never started a cryptocurrency company, nor have I started a fintech company, nor have I started a company in another vertical. And obviously part of the VC business is rather being broad than just like being deep. And I think for that reason it would be foolish to say that I think we have a much better understanding of like what the founder is going through. I think it's more on the personal matters that you can maybe relate slightly more because you've been in that situation. But like from an expertise standpoint, I would say it's probably not the case actually.
I mean, it's about the value of your network, that what brings you the deals at the end of the day. I mean, it is good if you can relate, if you can build up trust, but it's really, as we all say, it's not black and white. It's not that easy.
Andrei?
And something we've noticed, myself, I have capital markets background, other folks had, security background. Sometimes if you come from like a pretty niche domain, you have a tendency to really get very excited about every single company that comes across. And the right conclusion may be that you don't want to invest at all in that domain. So to some extent, you want to forget a bit some of the kind of nitty-gritty of your particular experience and try to put that investor hat and think equally about whether it's a security company or diaper subscription business, and just be intellectually honest to look at them with the same same kind of eyes. Yeah.
So do you think in the next years there will be like more VCs in Germany and Europe with that kind of track record, with this founding experience? Do you think the other side will also be?
I mean, inevitably, yes, because as there's more exits and there's more things happening in an ecosystem, obviously there's going to be more people who have previously been founders who then make some money that they have to invest. I mean, essentially it's the story of Cherry, right? It's sort of the founders of Cherry had some initial money that they were able to invest in angel rounds and were very, very successful with that, which then sort of enabled the later fundraise and now sort of where we're standing today. So I think that's inevitably the case. And maybe one more thing on the previous question. I think if you have a certain industry or domain expertise, you're sometimes even more critical. For example, like in our case, it's like every time there's a fashion company, I can already say who is going to be most bearish on it. It's actually the people who are coming from that industry, and sometimes it even prevents you from seeing things. And like Auto One is another example where there's a fund that passed on it, that actually had quite some automotive experience, and they passed on it because they really didn't believe in the model based on their preconception about how that market works, and then it turns out to be a massive company. So it can play both ways.
So how do you see the VC landscape in the next 5 years in Europe?
I mean, as I said before, it is a very clear trend that the VC industry is changing, that it's a clear trend that more founders are now becoming VCs, and it's good. But it's not just having this particular kind of mix, it's about having, in general, a mix. In order to be a good VC company, I truly believe you have to have a diverse team. If you want to make a high-risk decision, or many of those high-risk decisions, those bets in the future, you want to get as many different opinions as possible to make that kind of decision, because you just don't know. You are just assuming. So at the end of the day, that's what makes best VCs, in my opinion. Having a full diverse team with different backgrounds is fantastic to have founders on the team. as you said before, they really relate to the people and they can build trust very easily, but that's not the only setup to build trust at the end of the day, right? So yeah, I do see a clear trend. I guess that's why we're also sitting here. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we're also not that kind of typical VC.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about enterprise operators building funds in Germany, because I find a lot of the large exits, outside of SAP, of course, have been very much on the consumer side. But I think as now we're seeing more and more well-funded enterprise software companies coming up in Germany, maybe 5 years down the road, some of these guys will start their own funds. Because I think still on the B2B side, Germany has quite a lot more room to grow, and I find that's a promising area of growth.
Mm. So to sum it up a little bit, you said a mixed team is really important for a VC. So what is your advice for young people who want to become a VC these days? Found first, or just try to start in a VC firm, go to a bank? So what is your really hands-on advice for young people these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really cool job, but I would not necessarily advise young people to make VC their first job choice, because I think it just, you don't get out of it what you want out of it. Because if you flip again to the other side, the founders will want to speak with the people who can make the decisions, and inevitably, if you're super young and you're just straight out of university and you don't have any experience, either whether it's other investing experience or operating experience, I think you have a slightly harder time being taken serious. And I think you just don't have that much patterns that you can resort to in making your decisions. So I would say, there is no path to becoming a VC. In fact, I would say everyone has to figure out his or her own way. And there's clearly not the path that gets you there. And also there's, as Andrei said earlier, you still have to hustle your way to sort of have a great network and have solid deal flow and get one of the few VC jobs that there are in Europe. But there's clearly not the one path that gets you there.
Mm. Okay.
And
Andrei?
I also, maybe just to add to that, I also think it's kind of out of date, don't you think so? Yes, I want to be in 5 years there, and so I start now doing this. That's not what real life is about, I think to every young person, I always give the advice, do whatever you're passionate about, Forget about career advices or whatever kind of trends are happening. If you're passionate about a startup, go work for a startup. If you're passionate about doing analysis, become an analyst maybe, start up with an early position. There are so many things that you could do, but you can be only really successful if you really like what you're doing. Obviously, it's clear it makes sense to have a network, to have resources and experience to use once you want to become a serious VC, but there is no very clear way, and there are so many things to try out these days. We live in a different time now. It's not being judged anymore if you try out something and it doesn't work, You made your experience, and that's it, that's fine. So that is the only true advice that I would be giving here, because it's kind of old school to be thinking you can plan ahead, you cannot plan. Life is happening while it's happening.
Yeah.
Andrei?
Just on this point, I actually think a bit differently. So I think it's it's such a hard industry to enter that you should enter whenever that door opens, and you find a good firm where you can learn, good foundational skills that can carry forward. I would say, some of the good firms really work hard to kind of grow people internally. So, that's a good spot to be in. Another point is that it takes such a long time to first learn the skills, build a network, and then even figure out if you're a good investor or not. It may take 10 years to see some of the investments you worked on mature and actually exit. That you might as well start early, because you only reap the fruit, very late down the road. So, if you have that opportunity, I think it's worth taking. And at Accel, there are many folks that grew internally from associate, and I know other firms have that as well. So, obviously it depends very much on the role you can find and the firm that's kind of willing to teach you.
So now we'll open up the discussion to the audience. So do you have any questions to these three people?
I guess everybody's dehydrated. It's like 50 degrees inside. Are you guys still alive?
So, if there are no questions, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And have a
Thanks,
nice day.
guys. Thank you.